Thanks, Rolando. I really appreciate the invitation this morning. And frankly, you've got a fantastic lineup. I'm going to learn a lot today as well, listening to some of the employment services and resources available. Let me go ahead. I'm going to stop my video because I'm operating off of two big screens. At the end, there'll be time to ask some questions. All right. So as I mentioned, I'm frankly very impressed with who all is going to be on today. And I think there's going to be a lot of great information to share. And it was very wise to be able to record this as well, because for those of us who aren't able to, because of busy schedules, not able to sit in for the entire session, it's definitely information you don't want to miss. So if you cannot stay for the entire morning and early afternoon, then at least you can go back later and view it. So in addition to thanking Rolando, I want to also thank the other presenters today. I'm, as I mentioned several times already, very impressed with who all is going to be talking today. So let me discuss SBA, the U.S. Small Business Administration, who we are and what we do. That's our mission there, to help entrepreneurs and small business owners start, grow, expand, and recover their business. In the last part of that, recover their business, was almost used to be a footnote until COVID-19 hit. What I mean by recovering a business is help people to recover from disasters. The SBA, since 1953, when it was formed by Congress, was tasked as the only federal agency that exists solely to help small businesses. There are other agencies that provide some small business resources, loan programs, and services, but we exist only to help these small businesses. That is our entire mission and our focus. So recovering a business through the disaster loan programs has always been part of our core mission. However, we have never declared a disaster state of emergency for the entire country like what we are going through, actually since the beginning of March. So we do that in 4 ways that I list here: through the business loan programs that I'll talk about, the no fee and extremely high quality counseling services. And you'll hear from Valerie Henderson with the Small Business Development Center later today, talk about some of those services and resources they provide. And believe me, it is top notch. And I know it might be hard to fathom how you can get that for no fee, but she'll explain that as well a little bit later. Government contracting is a huge upside for small business. I'll talk about that. And exporting is a terrific opportunity. Of course, the disaster loan programs, I'll talk specifically about COVID-19 and the 2 disaster loan programs available right now, or one of which is currently active. The other, we hope, will get more funding soon. That's the Paycheck Protection Program. So let's start with a quiz to get your minds, your brains operating a little bit. Take a quick view of these companies. What are these companies? What are the company logos there? What do they represent that's in common with each and every one of them? Well, every one of them receives some kind of assistance from SBA. In the early stage, at some point in the life of those very large corporations, I mean, you're seeing some of the largest in the world, or some of the largest, at least in the country, some of the leaders in their industries. And this is just a small sampling, whether it's Apple or HP or Chobani Yogurt, Columbia Sportswear, JetBlue. They all had some kind of assistance. Most of them in the very early startup stage or early growth stages. They got SBA funding. Some of them got SBA assistance through something called Small Business Innovation Research Grants. They may have gotten some counseling services. They may have gotten government contracts. So one way or another, all of them that are now large corporations all started as a very small business. Many of them literally out of the garage, the basement of somebody, some entrepreneur, some innovator's home with an idea. And so they've grown into companies and employ thousands, in some cases, tens of thousands of folks and leaders in their industries. So they're every single business that's on the face of this earth now, whether large or small, started as a tiny concept at some point. So let me ask, what is a small business? A lot of people ask me that, probably next to the question about grants. The most often asked question I get is, what's a small business? And this is a one sheet graphic. It's probably a little bit grainy because of putting it on this slide and blowing it up a little bit. But basically, almost all businesses, 99.9% of all business in the United States is classified as a small business. I know that sounds almost impossible, but those are the statistics. When we think of those large corporations, the slide that I just showed previously, that's what many people think of with a large business. Mayor Blythe talked about the ribbon cutting in the industrial park and 3 nice sized companies that are located there. Even some of them could be classified as a small business depending on their industry. If you're in manufacturing and have less than 500 employees, in the manufacturing sector, that's classified as a small business. If you're in the wholesale business, if you're in retail, if you're in a service-based business, depending on what industry you're in, SBA, which is tasked by Congress to classify each and every business in its industry, what it takes to be still classified as a small business, they have to review that every few years. So that is part of SBA's job to designate what a business is classified as small, based either on the average annual revenue of the company, or based on the number of employees. So small business, as you may have heard, is truly big in terms of all the businesses in the country. So, and by the way, SBA, I mentioned one of the things we do is advocacy. And one of those points of advocacy is putting out these statistics, not just at the national level, like this graphic you're seeing through our Office of Advocacy, but also at the state level, at the district level. And we've got a profile on Kentucky-based businesses that just came out a few months ago. And we do updates on every state and U.S. territory every single year to get a more in-depth view of what a small business is on the state and territorial level. So here's what we're going to cover very briefly, kind of a high 50,000 foot level on the loan programs, including disaster recovery, the no fee counseling services that are available to anybody interested in starting a small business or who's in a business now but looking to grow or has challenges, which almost everybody dealing with COVID-19 now has significant challenges. As Mayor Blythe had said earlier, just trying to survive and get to the other side of this pandemic is a huge challenge for all of us. I don't think there's anybody alive today who's seen the pandemic like this. So we're all learning as we go. And one of the things that I have always admired about small businesses is the resiliency they have, the ability to focus on whatever the obstacle is, to get through it, the determination, et cetera, that is part of the makeup, the DNA of small business owners. So we'll talk also about what I alluded to earlier with government contracts and exporting, and then high level on the advocacy services we do. So let's talk first about the loan programs that SBA has. One thing I want to make clear to folks is that when you have what we call the traditional loan programs, I'll explain a little bit more about that in a moment. But what we do not do is compete. We do not, as a federal agency, go out there and compete directly with lenders. Lenders are our partners, and lenders could be any bank that's in your community. By the way, in Kentucky, almost every bank is authorized to do an SBA loan. There are a few that are not, but virtually every bank in every community across Kentucky and most banks across the country are able to do SBA loans if they choose to do them. They just submit a short form, 2-page form to provide some basic information. They get some training if they've never done SBA lending before. and they are provided with backup services through SBA's district offices and at the national level with training. And they have the ability to ask questions and work with SBA loan processing centers as well as the district offices. But the lending partners truly are partners with us. It is their money they are lending to you as a business owner, whether that be a bank or a credit union. And then the third type of SBA lender partner would be a nonprofit that is designated by SBA to do certain types of lending. That is on one of the specific loan programs that you'll see in just a few moments. And the other one is for micro lenders, and I'll talk about that as well. So we don't lend the money directly. The relationship that you as a business owner have is with your lender, whether that be that credit union, that bank, or the nonprofit organization authorized to do these types of loans. So their money, and they lend that directly to you as a small business owner. So what does SBA do? Why are we involved? We're in the middle to allow that lender to be able to say yes when they normally would say, we would like to, but we cannot. What I mean by that is SBA has guidelines that the lenders must follow. And we actually require a little bit more than a normal commercial bank loan or a normal credit union loan. What we ask for in addition is a little bit more background on the credit history of the borrower. We are able to dig into a few things that they're not able to do. What we provide the lender is a guarantee on that loan of up to, depending on the loan, the amount, the term, it can be as much as 85 or 90% of the loan value. So if the borrower, the business, defaults on the loan, then the lender gets paid that guarantee. The lender could lose a little bit of money, but they don't lose the entire loan. What that does is it reduces the risk to the lender and encourages them to take on those types of projects that they normally would say we cannot. Our bank covenants, our bank standard operating procedures tell us that we can't do this type of loan, or we would like to do this loan, but we can only do it for 3 years, and you're asking for a 7-year term on your loan. We can only do it for $100,000, but you say you need $200,000. This is where SBA gets involved with a lot of these types of projects. So we're helping you with the right size loan for you, what you need as a business. And we do truly have competitive rates that are mirroring what you're seeing in the market now with historically low interest rates. So we do not lend directly except for disaster loans, and I'll mention that in a moment. We work through lender partners all across the country, and particularly all across Kentucky. Community banks in particular, those are smaller banks. They have really helped tremendously with these small businesses in the pandemic. So we help as long as you're a for-profit small business with our traditional loan programs. You must be set up as a for-profit. If you're a nonprofit, maybe a socially driven mission, we're not able to work with you by law. Congress set us up and created us in order to work and encourage entrepreneurs in entrepreneurship and small business ownership, except again for disaster loans. So I'll mention that in a few slides later. So we work with businesses that are for profit based in the United States. And if you're a startup, you're expected to have some skin in the game. What I mean by that is you have to contribute some of your own money when you're starting a business, or in some situations, even when you're growing a business. If you go to the lender and you say, I need $100,000, and the lender asks, well, what are you going to put into this project? And you say nothing. They're going to say, we cannot work with you. You must put some of your own money. You must take on some of the risk yourself. Now, in many cases, it's as little as 10 or 20% you and 80 to 90% them being the lender. You have to put some of your own money into the project, and you must not be in a situation where you can afford to put all of the money. SBA is not there for the millionaires out there that don't need us. We're there for those types of projects where you truly need somebody else's money, OPM, other people's money, but you've got some of your own that you are willing and have to risk, because we've found over the decades that if you got some risk in it, you are going to fight harder in situations like what we're all going through now, because you know you're going to lose what you've invested in it too. But we've found over the decades that that is the best approach of having you take on some of the risk as well. You must be a for-profit small business, and we don't want to see businesses set up to fail. So we want to make sure that you're able to repay the loan. We can do that by extending the term of the loan. Instead of that normal, say, 3 year term on a loan, we might be able to allow the bank to take it out to 4 or 5 years. Instead of being required to put in a very large amount of collateral to back up the loan, sometimes we can reduce the amount that you have to have as collateral to back up the loan. We also almost always, unless it's a very small project, require a business plan. And that's where our resource partners like the SBDC and others can help you put together a very sound, solid, well thought out plan. And we want to make sure it cash flows. In other words, we don't want to see a situation where all you're doing is borrowing money and ending up paying back the interest and principal on a loan, but it's not really helping your business out. If it doesn't allow you to have more working capital, it's not benefiting you. So we look at those situations to see, does it make sense? And most of the time it does. And you're able to get that loan particularly with assistance from our resource partners, to understand going in what the lender looks for, what your expectations are, and what their expectations are, to ensure that everybody understands the project, that it makes sense to them. But we're there to help when they want to work with you, but they cannot because there's something missing in the project. Maybe you don't have as much collateral for the loan. Maybe you don't have enough equity injection, cash to put into the project. Those are situations where SBA is able to help you, and it works great for the lender too, because they're able to say yes. So these are our primary loan programs. I wouldn't get hung up on, the two names, the 7A loan and the 504 loan. Just understand that these are the types of projects where most lenders, that's their world. The 7A loan is the one that banks and credit unions use all the time. About 80 to 90% of all of our lending every year in Kentucky and across the country is in that bucket of lending activity. That's where the lender provides the capital to you, you pay back the loan to the lender, and SBA is on the backside of it as that guarantor to the lender. So it's in below there, you'll see all the different types of ways you can use that money. Now, the 504 loan is a very specialized loan, and it's designed as a way for job creation, economic development. And the way it works is you don't work with a bank or a credit union. In this case, you're working with what's called a certified development company, or CDC. They are nonprofit organizations approved by SBA to do this special type of loan. And for every certain amount of money you borrow, in most cases it's around $70,000, $80,000, you're expected to create a job. And that is because part of the program is designed for larger investments for land and building and durable equipment with a life of 10 years or more. So again, it's a very narrowly focused type of program. But the great thing about that is the term on these loans, it's a long-term fixed rate on the project. And in many cases, it can go out to a 25-year fixed rate on the SBA part of this loan. You can put as little as 10% of the total project into it. SBA can do as much as 40%. And then you work with your bank, your commercial lender, whoever that might be, to do the rest of the deal. What does that mean for them? Why would they get involved in that? Well, that reduces the risk to them by 50% right off the bat. And what it is good for from your perspective is you're able to put in less cash, 10% in many, many situations sometimes 15 or 20% if it's a brand new limited use building that maybe you're putting up, like a car wash, or if it's a situation where you're a brand new startup with no history whatsoever. But in most situations with the 504 loan, you're putting in 10% and getting that long-term fixed rate. So in Kentucky last year, just to give you an idea on 7A loans, this past year, our fiscal year ended September 30th, we did on the 7A side, $157 million, 366 loans this past year in Kentucky. That's down. And given the pandemic, it's certainly understandable why it's down. But it still is a solid year. That's right below what we do on average every year. What's amazing about that is that the average dollar amount on our loans more than doubled this past year. Those loans typically average 200,000, 225,000. It was up to almost 430,000 this past year. So on the 7A side, the projects that were getting approved, and there weren't as many of them, of course, we really just had less than 6 months of our fiscal year before the pandemic really hit hard. We were doing these types of projects with regularity, and then it slowed down dramatically. The 504 loan, on those, we did pretty average year, 27 loans, almost $18 million on these types of projects. Again, land, building, and durable equipment is all that 504 loan is for. For every roughly $70,000, $80,000, depending on circumstances, you need to create a job. Not immediately. In some situations, it could be months or perhaps years, a few years later before that job is created. And for these types of projects, a lot of times we see motels getting built, a franchise motel or a restaurant. The job creation aspect is very, very seldom is that a challenge for the business. So the other end of the spectrum is the small loans that we do. And Kentucky has one of the strongest, what we call microloan programs, one of the strongest microloan programs in the country. This past year, we did $2.6 million in Kentucky, which is a great year. And it's over 200 loans in the state. We have 5 micro lenders, and the average was a little over $12,500. These are for smaller projects. These are for situations where somebody has very little credit history or has challenges with their credit history. Sometimes it's used for professionals who, for instance, want to open up their own law practice, or an accounting firm. Maybe they spin off from their employer. They're a 1 or 2 person operation. They don't need a lot of money. They don't want to buy a building. They don't have any inventory. But what they need is some equipment, some furniture, fixtures, equipment to set up their office, for instance. And they might need $12,000, $20,000 to pay for that, as well as some upfront payments for lease and insurance, et cetera. So it is really an ideal situation for those where they have some kind of challenges, or a lot of professionals use it because they don't need a lot of money. And sometimes it's more of a challenge to borrow $10,000 or $20,000 from your lender than it is $100,000. Simply because the amount of money made on interest on these smaller loans is not a lot. So these are ideal projects, whether it's a small project for somebody working out of their basement, their home, they're selling on Etsy, for instance, or if it's somebody that's a professional, but they just don't have a big staff and don't want to own a building or need money for inventory. Now, this is where grants come in, and SBA only has 2 primary grant programs. That slide, that second or third slide that had the logos with all the companies, some of those companies, Intel, Apple, et cetera, were part of what's called SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research, or Small Business Tech Transfer, STTR. Those programs are for companies that have the ability to grow rapidly. Many times they're for situations where they're working with a government on a contract and are looking to prove concepts. So sometimes on these grants, They're provided 50 or 100, $150,000 to prove a concept. Many of them are involved with university research. In fact, almost all of them are involved with universities, and they might have somebody very bright working there. I know of a number of them that are either folks who are working on their PhD and working on some really innovative solution. It could be something medically related. It could be something with Department of Defense, those types of projects that have high potential, and they need some funding to A, prove that the concept works, B, to scale it up. And then finally, the end game is for them to spin off to create a new small business that grows. We've got a number of them across the state. Most of them were either affiliated with the University of Kentucky or University of Louisville, and some other universities throughout the region. So that's one end of it. Small export grants are the other type of grant we get involved with. Sometimes $500 to $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 for exporting needs. These are for companies looking to get into markets in other countries. So those grants are very specifically designed for, say, a company that wants to go to Montreal, Canada, and they need to set up at a trade show, and they need to translate all of their marketing materials into French as well as the English version, and they have some other related expenses. So it's not just for general small business needs. They're very specifically designed, and they're handled through the Kentucky Cabinet for Economic Development. They administer these grants in the Kentucky Export Initiative. So most of these are $3,000 to $7,000 amounts of money that these companies can tap into. Very much needed, but very, very narrow focus on both of these programs. So let's talk very briefly about the disaster recovery and what SBA has been doing. SBA.gov, if you go to our website, you'll see all over the landing page and some links there about disaster recovery, loan programs, etc. So the first one is, here's another one of those acronyms, EIDL, E-I-D-L. That stands for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, EIDL. That's part of our regular disaster loan program. We have disaster funds for small businesses. It's been available for many, many decades. If it's been a flood, wildfire, earthquake, tornado, hurricane, a lot of times you'll see after those disasters occur, you'll see FEMA on the ground and within a few days, and SBA is usually there shortly thereafter to help people recover their business. And we also, Congress allows us to work with homeowners and even renters in those situations. Sometimes the business has not been physically touched at all by disaster. The pandemic is a great example. While it hasn't been impacted physically, the roof has not been blown off their building. They didn't have flooding in there that hadn't ruined their inventory or their equipment. However, everyone's revenue has been dramatically impacted. So what SBA does is provides for small businesses and not all, but many nonprofits, these types of disaster loans. This program is continuing through the end of this year. It's specifically for the pandemic, for COVID-19, if you've been impacted. There are two types of programs. The one, and I've got it in red, the EIDL Advance, which is a grant that you did not have to pay back. People who applied before the beginning early July, they were able, as business owners or nonprofits in many cases, to be able to get a grant of $1,000 per employee up to 10 employees. So they got that grant. And then the loan is a longer term loan that we're still accepting applications through the end of this year on those loans. And we're processing them as they come in. In other words, you submit the loan application today, and they're going to start working on it very quickly. But you know, they work in the order they were received. So we're doing this with nonprofits and small businesses, as well as agricultural-based businesses throughout the country. And there's been some questions because SBA, by a directive from Congress, has been able to open up this program to the agricultural sector as well, much more so than we were able to in the past. And these are some examples there with those bullets of types of businesses. They're agricultural-based businesses, but the bullets there, the 5 bullets down there, like aquaculture and ranching, that people are able to tap into the loan program. And there's that very long link below at the bottom there, but if you go to sba.gov, you'll see that you can click on at the very top of the landing page, sba.gov, and see at the very top about COVID-19 relief and be able to see how to get into these pages with the various loan programs and a lot of information on those. So if you're a small business and you get one of these EIDLs, economic injury disaster loans, you've got an interest rate, fixed rate 3.75% for a small business and 2.75% for these nonprofits that are eligible for up to 30 years. So the interest and principal oftentimes are well under $100 a year on many of these loans. And you can pay it off early, or you can take the full term if it's up to 30 years to pay off that loan. They're very flexible for lots of types of expenses, as you see there: payroll, rent, utilities, etc. Plus, you do not have to begin paying on these types of loans for up to a year. So you've got, from the time you get approved on that loan and the funds get transferred into your account, you have up to a year before you need to start paying on them. And it's handled through a central SBA disaster servicing center. And you get your money deposited directly from SBA into your account, your bank account. So this is the exception to our normal lending. Here is some information. If you go to that link, sba.gov/disaster, that'll get you into all of this information I'm talking about. They've got a 1-800 number listed there, as well as an email address. If you get turned down, you've got up to 6 months to request reconsideration. You put it in writing and you request that they reconsider this. And as I've got there, email is the best way to communicate if you've been turned down. Fax is the second choice. We do not recommend that you mail in any information to the disaster center folks. They're in Fort Worth, Texas, because they have so much mail there. And the best way is to deal electronically with a request for reconsideration. So there's a process for that. And I work with folks, as do others in our Kentucky office and all across the country, literally every day on this, with somebody who's got questions about one of these, whether it's this or the PPP loan, the EIDL or PPP loan. The application is very simple, and it's surprisingly so. It's a 4-step process, 4 screens, maybe 8 screens, but it's the same. You either provide business information, the owner background, additional info on the business, and then you kind of review it and then click submit. Word of caution: when you have the summary page and you look over everything, don't click submit until you know for sure you have no mistakes, because it's very hard. It will delay a lot if you, for instance, put in your wrong bank account, you put in your wrong address or something of that nature. So, look that over carefully, but it's a very quick process. For instance, the first page is just choose one of these. What type of business are you? You simply pick whichever one, fill in the little bubble, and then click next screen. And this is the next screen. Check all of these that apply. If only one applies or multiple ones apply, you hit, the ones that do, and then you move to this screen. What is the legal name of your business? What is your EIN or social security number? What type of organization are you, an LLC? And some of them, for instance, have the drop down. Just click over there and it'll say, are you an S Corp? Are you an LLC? Are you a sole proprietor? And then you just click the appropriate one and then move to the next screen. So it is very quick to apply. Here's some more examples. This, I want to say, is probably one of the more important screens to get right. Gross revenue for the past year, and cost of goods. This is where a lot of people have made mistakes because they try to hurry up through the process, or they didn't quite understand what was being asked if they're not very familiar with these types of terms as business owners. That's sometimes the case. The PPP loan, that's the one that was through the banks. The banks were doing these loans, and you're hearing a lot. If you've gotten a PPP loan, you're hearing about getting that loan, asking for forgiveness on the loan. It can be up to 100% forgivable on the loan if you used it for typically for payroll and a few other limited expenses. Now, that program expired August 8th. Congress has not yet reauthorized that. It could happen. We don't know. We have heard lots of folks, members of Congress, and many, many other leaders across the country say they need to restart this program. But we don't know yet if or when it will restart. They're asking if somebody who got a PPP loan earlier in the year, if they could get a second one. Right now they cannot, but we're thinking that's part of what Congress is considering in the future. But we do not know anything about what's going to happen with that program, if it's going to restart, and if so, what the parameters are. Just to give you an idea, I mentioned last year's SBA loan numbers in the state was about $175 million. Just for, roughly a 6-month period on the EIDL loans and the advanced grants, we did over $1.4 billion through the end of October 28th, over 68 or almost 68,000. PPP loans just in Kentucky, over almost $5.3 billion in almost 51,000 loans. Just to give you a sense of how big that is, in the past decade on our traditional loan programs that I talked about, over a 10-year period, we did almost $1.8 billion in almost 7,400 loans. Look at the numbers above. That is why everyone has been so busy trying to help these small businesses and eligible nonprofits to recover from the pandemic. So how are we helping with that? Through our resource partners. I talked earlier about the certified development companies. You're going to hear in a few minutes from Valerie Henderson with the Small Business Development Center. We have women's business centers, WBCs. We have SCORE that provide long-term mentoring. We have veteran business outreach centers across the country. So they're literally there to provide confidential, no fee. They did and will in the future provide one-on-one counseling. Right now, everything's virtual, and it is extremely high quality. It is free, and you're going to be very surprised if you've not used any of these resources before at how good they are, how dedicated they are, how smart they are, how experienced they are to help you. Whether you're a startup concept or you're a business that's been around for 20, 30 years, you can get value out of working with these folks. So they're literally across the country. They're across Kentucky. We've got a SBDC office that covers anywhere from 5 to 15 counties. And again, Valerie Henderson's going to talk about their particular situation over there in the Berea area. But they all have great tools, templates, research databases. They all have experience, maybe not in your industry, but many of them do, particularly with SCORE, because they have a lot of volunteers that do that. The SBDC folks are full-time. The Women's Business Center and Veteran Business folks also are full-time. And what they do is provide their experience, knowledge, and resources to help you with whatever your challenges are. This is just a list of some of the things that the SBDC, SCORE, and Women's Business Centers do in Kentucky. Right now, everything is focused on surviving, preserving cash flow, shifting totally in most situations to social media marketing, because you can't have a whole lot of folks coming into, or in some cases, hardly any of your customers coming into your establishment. They also are talking is a great way to replace lost revenue with government contracting, exporting, et cetera. So that's just a short list of some of the things they focus on and do very well for you. And if you were to pay for this, it would cost you tens of thousands of dollars in many cases to get what you can at literally no cost to you. It's paid for through tax dollars, so you can take advantage of it. There is their contact information in Kentucky for the Small Business Development Center, again, SBDC for short, SCORE, the mentoring that they provide, the Women's Business Center, and our office, which is in Louisville, but covers the entire state. So just screenshots of the SBDC, their landing page, you see they do weekly webinars. They have a lot of information on COVID-19 at the bottom of the screen. Just click on there, learn more, and it takes you right into all of the information they have. And by the way, while they're affiliated with SBA, they're not obligated to only talk about SBA loan programs. They talk about other types of programs. Many of the counties, some of the cities have CARES Act dollars that are designated to help. Sometimes they have grants, and if they don't have grants, sometimes they have low interest loans, and they're experts in their area of the state. They know about all the various loan programs, services, resources available, and they're going to find what's best for you in your particular situation right now. That is what they do, and they do it very well. As I mentioned earlier, SCORE folks are volunteers. Many of them are at the end of their career and are giving back, literally just giving back because they're wanting to help out others. But a lot of them are still active in their career and are doing this just part-time. But yeah, you can just click on if you want to set up a time to meet. You find a mentor who is in your industry. You can take some virtual workshops, and they've got other resources available. So the Women's Business Center, normally they do an annual conference and expo. They aren't this year, but they do a lot of the Business Builder Workshop, CEO virtual roundtable events right now, doing a lot of this online, and they do some other programs. They are also experts on the microloan program. They actually have a microloan program with the organization that is their host out of Lexington. Other resources. I mentioned a couple of times about government contracts and the huge upside for small business. Don't have time to get into all of these, what an 8A business is, but it's an SBA designation, a federal designation for a disadvantaged business. HubZone is a disadvantaged geographic area of a state. If you're a woman-owned small business and certified as that, or service-disabled veteran-owned small business, you have advantages in competing for government contracts. So as I've got there on that bullet, it's a great way to replace lost revenue from the pandemic. It's a great way to grow your company and grow it profitably. And actually, the federal agencies that participate in this program, there are 13, 14 of them that do that. They spend over $100 billion every single year with small businesses and contracts. In fact, last year was roughly, I think, about $125 billion. And they're looking all the time for small businesses to work with. So that is a great opportunity, even for service-based businesses. It's not just products that are getting sold to the federal government. And then think about state government, local government, school systems, utility companies, even corporations that are looking for small businesses as well for part of their contracting opportunities. Oh, let me back up. The Kentucky PTAC, KYPTAC, that stands for Procurement Technical Assistance Center. That I put that link there because you can read how they will work with you as well to help you assess, does it make sense for me as a business owner? And then if I think it does, they can help you with getting into the database, because everything is done with electronic matching and they put bids out electronically, and you need to understand that. It's a little confusing. They will sit down like these other resource partners and work with you on that. Exporting, just remember this. Over 96% of the world's population lives outside of the United States. So if you're not thinking about how to export, particularly products, but I've even seen some small businesses that are able to export their services overseas, and they've done a fantastic job of it. It's not for everyone, but there are ways to assess whether this makes sense for you as an opportunity now or in the near future. We have folks who can sit down again at no cost to provide counseling, help you figure out, does it make sense, how to connect with those businesses overseas. There are SBA loan programs designed specifically for international trade, lines of credit as well as loans that help you, and other resources that help you figure out, well, if I export my product, how do I get paid for that? Do I get it paid in their currency? How do I get that converted? There are all kinds of resources to help you. It's much simpler now than it was even a decade ago. KentuckyExports.com, those are the folks, the Kentucky Export Initiative. And the SBDC has some folks who also have knowledge, a lot of knowledge. In some cases, they've been certified in exporting in the past. And so there are opportunities, even if not now, in the future, to consider. So I mentioned advocacy. I talked about the fact that we do small business statistics. These are just some of the other things we do. Small Business Week, typically every May, they celebrate it in Washington, D.C. with award winners. They didn't do it this year because of the pandemic. It was virtual. But we do an event every year to celebrate. And SBA in Kentucky, we normally this time of the year, we're soliciting nominations for awards. We can't do that yet, but pretty soon on our state website, sba.gov/KY, we will have all the information if you want to nominate yourself or somebody else for Small Business Person of the Year, Woman-Owned Person of the Year, Minority-Owned Business of the Year, Veteran-Owned Business of the Year. If you have a rural based business, and there are a lot of other categories. I think we have 14 or 15 different categories just in Kentucky. So Small Business Week's a big celebration that highlights the importance of small businesses. Mayor Blythe talked earlier about Main Street and the importance of supporting small businesses. That's one of the things we do. Plus, one of my roles is to highlight some of these great success stories. I try and capture those in our national database and help promote those businesses. And we're doing that all the time. So if you think you've got a great success story and you want to share that with me, contact me. If you've gotten some kind of resource or service through SBA and our resource partners, or you got a loan or you got a government contract or whatever it might be, and SBA somehow played a small or maybe a large role, then I want to talk to you about that and see how we can highlight your story. So last thing I want to leave, hopefully with a little bit of inspiration, given the situation. I thought this was pretty appropriate from Winston Churchill. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. And it is encouraged to continue that counts. Can't tell you how many people I have personally talked to in the last 30 years that have said, my first business failed. Second business might have even failed. But I learned so much from that. The failures taught me much more than I ever could have expected. And they learned. Sometimes by working with resource partners, by having enough working capital, maybe through a loan or a line of credit. That's the difference between success and failure. Sometimes it's not anything you're doing wrong. You just don't have enough resources at hand. There are folks that can help you with all of that. So here's my contact info. I know we don't have a whole lot of time. I don't know if anybody's got questions or if y'all got any in the chat box or not.
Thank you, Michael, for your presentation and for all the great resources today. We do actually have one question for you. The question is, when is Small Business Week?
Well, normally Small Business Week is the first full week in May. First full week in May. There's also something else going on in Kentucky. It's called the Derby. But this past year, back this past May, they delayed it actually until September because of the pandemic. And for those awards, we are had some of the award winners compete nationally, but most of them, it's a state level award. We don't know yet. We're hoping real soon, within the next few weeks, we're going to know when Small Business Week is for 2020. I'm sorry, 2021. So we'll find that out probably before Thanksgiving. And I'll have it on our website, and my email and phone number are right there on that screen. If anybody wants to contact me directly, you can do that, or go to the website. I'll be doing a lot of tweets on it. We've got our Twitter handle for Kentucky, SBA _Kentucky, and I post lots of things. That's one of them I'm sure we'll be talking about a lot in the coming weeks.